2 words. That's it. Not a sentence, not a speech, not some rehearsed pickup line you scribbled on a napkin at 2 a.m. 2 simple words that, when slipped into a conversation at exactly the right moment, can change the emotional tone of an interaction in a way most men completely overlook. Her attention may sharpen, she may pause, she may smile differently, she may lean in, because for a moment she feels something surprisingly rare, understood. And here's the part that matters. Most men spend years trying to become more attractive by focusing on their appearance, money, confidence, status, or the perfect thing to say. But sometimes attraction isn't created by saying something impressive. Sometimes it begins when a woman realizes that you were actually paying attention. Think about the last time someone truly noticed something about you that almost everyone else missed. Maybe they remembered the little detail you mentioned weeks earlier. Maybe they noticed you became quieter when a certain subject came up. Maybe they recognized that your laugh changed when you were genuinely comfortable. Didn't that feel different? If you've ever experienced that feeling of being genuinely seen, tell me in the comments. What did someone notice about you that made you remember them? Your answer might help someone else understand what meaningful connection actually feels like. And if you're wondering why this tiny difference can matter so much in relationships, stay with me, because we're going to unpack the psychology behind it, how to use it naturally, and perhaps most importantly, when not to use it. Mary Smith, host of Senior Mindful Living YouTube channel. Before we reveal the 2 words, there's something important you need to understand. This isn't a secret female code, a manipulation technique, or a magic phrase that makes someone fall for you. There is no 2-word sentence that can manufacture attraction where none exists. And anyone promising that is selling you a fantasy. What these words can do is communicate something much more realistic and much more powerful: attention. The 2 words are simply, I noticed. That's it. But what comes after those words is where the psychology becomes interesting. I noticed you always get more animated when you talk about your grandchildren. I noticed you thought about that answer before you responded. I noticed you've been unusually quiet today. Is everything okay? I noticed you always seem to ask about everyone else before talking about yourself. Notice what these examples have in common. They're not primarily about her appearance. They're about her behavior, personality, emotions, interests, or patterns. And that distinction matters. Imagine 2 different conversations. A man says, "You're beautiful. There's nothing inherently wrong with that." A sincere compliment can absolutely be appreciated. But now imagine he says, "I noticed how your whole expression changed when you started talking about something you're passionate about." The second statement communicates something different. It says, "I was paying attention." And being paid attention to is fundamentally different from simply being complimented. Many people, not only women, receive generic compliments constantly. You're beautiful. You're amazing. You're so nice. These statements can feel pleasant, but they're interchangeable. They could apply to thousands of people. A specific observation is personal. It belongs to that particular person. That's why specificity can create emotional impact. Psychologists have spent decades studying the importance of responsiveness, appreciation, emotional validation, and feeling understood in close relationships. Research on intimacy, gratitude, and relationship satisfaction repeatedly points toward a similar principle. People tend to feel closer when they believe another person understands them and responds thoughtfully to who they actually are. Arthur Aaron's famous intimacy research is often discussed in this context. His work showed how structured self-disclosure and sustained attention can help strangers develop a greater sense of closeness. The lesson isn't that you should interrogate someone with dozens of personal questions. It's that connection grows when people move beyond surface-level interaction and begin genuinely paying attention to one another. And that's where "I noticed" becomes useful. It gives you a simple way to communicate that you're not merely waiting for your turn to speak. You're observing, you're listening, you're present. But there's a major warning here. If you use "I noticed" as a rehearsed technique, it can become awkward very quickly. Imagine saying, "I noticed that you moved your hair 3 times in the last 5 minutes. That's not intimacy. That's surveillance." Or, "I noticed your body looks incredible in that dress." That's not the kind of observation we're talking about either. The goal is not to make someone feel watched. The goal is to make them feel understood. There's a huge psychological difference between those 2 experiences. One creates discomfort. The other can create warmth. So here's the first rule. Only say something you genuinely noticed. Don't invent observations because a video told you they are attractive. Don't pretend to understand someone's personality after knowing them for 10 minutes. And don't turn every interaction into amateur psychoanalysis. Instead, pay attention naturally. Suppose you're having coffee with a woman you've been seeing. She tells you about a difficult decision at work. Instead of immediately jumping in with advice, you listen. Maybe she says, "I don't know, I'm thinking about changing careers, but I'm scared." You might simply say, "I noticed you said thinking rather than wanting." It sounds like part of you is already considering the change seriously. Then stop, let her respond. You aren't telling her what she feels. You're giving her an opportunity to explore what she may already be feeling. That's a much more respectful form of emotional connection. And here's another important point. Don't assume every observation is accurate. People are complicated. You can misread someone's behavior. So instead of saying, "I noticed you're afraid of commitment," which sounds like a diagnosis, try something softer. "I noticed you became quieter when we started talking about the future. Did that topic make you uncomfortable?" See the difference? The first statement declares. The second invites. One puts her inside a box. The other opens a door. That is much healthier communication. There's another reason specific attention can matter so much in long-term relationships. Familiarity changes the way we perceive people. When you've been with someone for years, you can become so accustomed to their presence that you stop actively noticing them. You know their routines, you know what they order, you know their favorite stories. But knowing someone's habits isn't necessarily the same as seeing the person behind those habits. Maybe your wife has been unusually tired lately. Maybe your partner has stopped talking about something she used to love. Maybe she has started taking longer walks alone. Maybe she keeps saying, "I'm fine," while sounding completely different. Instead of ignoring it, you could say, "I noticed you've seemed a little distant this week. You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to. But I'm here." That's not a seduction technique. That's care. And sometimes care is exactly what intimacy needs. Relationship researcher John Gottman has famously written about bids for connection's small moments, when one partner reaches toward another through a comment, question, gesture, or shared observation. Healthy relationships tend to involve partners responding to these moments rather than repeatedly ignoring them. Think about how small these moments can be. Look at that sunset. Guess what happened at work today? I'm exhausted. Listen to this song. Do you remember that restaurant we went to? Every one of these can become a tiny invitation. You can turn toward it or away from it. And over months and years, those tiny choices can shape how emotionally connected two people feel. That's why "I noticed" is not powerful because of the words themselves. It's powerful because it represents a behavior. Attention, curiosity, presence. Now let's make this practical. The next time you're talking with someone you're interested in, don't spend the entire conversation planning your next impressive sentence. Instead, try an exercise. For 5 minutes, simply observe. What subjects make her voice become more energetic? What makes her smile naturally? What does she return to repeatedly? What does she seem passionate about? When does she become thoughtful? What little details does she remember? Then, if something genuinely stands out, mention it naturally. "I noticed you get really excited when you talk about your work." And then let the conversation continue. Don't immediately follow it with another clever statement. Silence can be valuable. Give the other person room to respond. This is where many people make a mistake. They discover one emotionally meaningful observation and then turn it into a performance. "I noticed this about you, and I noticed that about you, and I noticed this other thing." Now the person feels analyzed. You don't need 10 observations. One sincere observation can be enough. Here's another example. Suppose she says, "I'm probably being too sensitive." A weak response might be, "No, you're not." That sounds supportive, but it doesn't necessarily engage with what she said. A more thoughtful response might be, "I noticed you apologize whenever you express something strongly." Then pause. Maybe she says, "I do that?" Now you've created an opportunity for self-awareness, rather than simply handing her another compliment. But be careful. This is where emotional intelligence matters. You aren't there to fix her. You aren't there to expose hidden wounds. You're simply reflecting something you've genuinely observed. That distinction protects the interaction from becoming manipulative. And there's one more advanced version of this technique that can be especially meaningful. Instead of noticing only what someone does, notice something positive about how they approach life. For example, I noticed you always make sure everyone else has what they need before you sit down. Or, I noticed you don't give up easily when something matters to you. Or, I noticed you become incredibly focused when someone you care about needs help. These statements can feel powerful because they recognize qualities rather than appearances. But again, don't exaggerate. If you've known someone for 15 minutes, don't tell them you've discovered their deepest character. Let your observations grow as your knowledge of the person grows. One of the most attractive qualities in any relationship is emotional accuracy. Not mind reading, not pretending to know everything. Accuracy. The ability to listen carefully enough that your response actually fits the person in front of you. And that's why generic dating advice can sometimes become so confusing. Be mysterious. Text less. Make her chase you. Never show too much interest. Always compliment her. Those rules turn relationships into strategy games. But real connection doesn't require you to constantly calculate. You don't need to pretend you don't care. You don't need to manufacture jealousy. You don't need to disappear for 3 days to create mystery. You need to become more attentive. Because if you're genuinely interested in someone, why wouldn't you want to know them? Here's a simple challenge. Over the next 48 hours, choose one person you genuinely care about, a partner, friend, family member, coworker, or someone you're dating. Don't force an attraction-related interaction. Just notice something real. Maybe they have a habit you've never mentioned. Maybe they've been working harder than usual. Maybe something they've been excited about has changed. Maybe they smile whenever a certain subject comes up. Then tell them, I noticed. And finish the sentence honestly. No manipulation, no expectation, no demand for a particular reaction. Just recognition. And then pay attention to what happens. Maybe they smile. Maybe they open up. Maybe they laugh. Maybe they tell you that nobody has ever noticed that before. Or maybe they simply say, really? That's okay too. The goal isn't to create a guaranteed reaction. The goal is to practice being genuinely present. Because ultimately, the deepest lesson isn't about 2 words. It's about becoming the kind of person who notices. A woman doesn't need you to memorize a psychological trick. She doesn't need you to perform some secret formula. She needs to know whether the person sitting across from her is actually interested in who she is or merely interested in what he wants from her. And that difference can often be felt. So the next time you're with someone you're attracted to, don't ask yourself, what can I say that will make her like me? Ask a better question. What am I actually noticing about this person? That question changes everything. And if you genuinely find something worth noticing, you already know how to begin. I noticed. If this video gave you a different perspective on attraction and emotional connection, share it with someone who could benefit from it. And if you try the exercise, come back and tell me what happened in the comments. Subscribe to Senior Mindful Living and turn on the bell. Because sometimes the most powerful relationship lessons aren't about saying more, they're about finally paying attention. And remember one final thing. The right person won't be impressed because you memorize 2 words. They'll appreciate you because over time, your actions prove that you genuinely see them. That's not a trick, that's connection.